welcome again. Welcome back to the Way to Be podcast. We are so excited you're joining us again. My name is Rachel Glade.
And I'm Elizabeth Rosenzweig.
And this season, we're talking about all things speech-language pathology. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Christina Bradburn, and we are going to be talking about all things school-based speech-language pathology. So thank you so much, Dr. Bradburn, for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, Elizabeth is going to start off with our first question.
Amazing. So I wonder if you'd give us a little bit of background. How did you make your way into this profession and then into your current role working with and advocating for school-based SLPs?
Oh, wow. So when I was 6, way back, when I was 6, my grandmother had a stroke. And when she came home, she did in-home rehab, and there was an SLP that would come and work with her on speaking and swallowing. And I actually sat on the bed and watched and was so interested. And I pretended to do the therapy when she would leave. And so it's kind of a story. I've always talked about being a speech lady, like so-and-so, when I was little. When I got older, I went back and forth. But then I had a guidance counselor in high school sit me down and say, the testing that you show, this looks like it would be a good profession for you. And at the time, it was called communication sciences. I was a first generation college student. So I had never filled out a college application. I didn't know what I was doing. And she said, just check speech language pathology. I think it would be great for you. And so those two things together kind of led me on my path. I started at Indiana State. And so I graduated with my master's in 2000. And from there, I've done all kinds of different things. I think I was a preschool SLP in a public school in Indiana for my first 5 years. And then I took a break when I had kids, and I provided early intervention services. So I did in-home early intervention through our state while I stayed home with my kids most of the time. At that time, I moved into an evaluation position where I determined eligibility for services in general, not just for speech, but for OT and PT and developmental therapy for our state. So I was learning to see the whole child during that time, not just their communication deficits and how we could all work together. And that was my introduction into the benefits of co-treatment and working with other people outside of your profession. So from there, I went back to the schools, and I was actually working in the elementary I attended when I was younger, and the elementary school that my kids were attending at the time. So I worked there. They were preschool through 5th grade. And when I took over the caseload, there were 109 kids on that caseload. And it was a very difficult transition to seeing one kid for an hour at a time, moving into a school where I had 109 kids to see in a week, more than once a week. So I really, my progression in my profession, since now I'm such an advocate for school-based SLPs, because I know how hard it was at first and how there are many different ways to do things that we don't necessarily learn about in grad school because it's the logistics of the school piece and not our skill set. So I started integrating services and moving to flexible service delivery models, workload analysis, all of that. And so from there, I was asked to start speaking on that. So part of my journey has included presentations to school-based SLPs who are currently working, who are struggling with scheduling or high caseloads or anything that makes our job harder than it should be is what I like to present on and make sure that we remember why we're doing what we're doing in the first place, and we don't get overloaded by all of the hard stuff, which there's plenty, but making sure that we keep that at the forefront. So I did both for a while. I did presentations and working in the schools, and then I decided to go back and get my doctorate in 2020. So that was so from 2020 to 2023, I was working on that. And during that time, I made some professional transitions to some other areas in our district. So I'm currently the assistant director for our district, focusing in on behavior and communication needs of our students. So it was a long journey, a long answer to a short question, but I think it kind of shows that just because you go to school for one particular thing, as long as you're always learning from other people and always trying new things, you can take your career actually, even if you're a school-based SLP, you can take it many different places. You're not just always going to be in a school working with kids unless you want to. So.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay. Before I let Rachel ask her question, I have 2 thoughts. One is I love the picture of little Christina sitting on a bed with her grandmother. And I think it speaks to, we just never know who we're going to touch or inspire And I would love to think in some world that SLP is going to listen to this podcast and know what became of the inspiration she gave. And second, you mentioned being a first generation college student. I also hope that a lot of people listening to this are also first generation college students or aspiring to be that in their family. And maybe we don't need to scare them that they have to go all the way for a doctorate like you did. But I wonder what advice you might give to particularly first generation college students who are interested in pursuing SLP or CSD careers.
I think the main piece of advice I would give is that it isn't always the skill set that you learn when you go to school, but you have to kind of think about what you need before you would start it. So like the ability, the empathy that's needed to work with people, with students with special needs, I don't know, the fact that people and relationships need to matter to you just as much as the content that you're going to be learning. If those are the skill sets that you have, relationship building and patience, I don't think the content should be as overwhelming or intimidating, especially to first year college students, because if you haven't had experience or stories from your parents about what college life is like, it can seem really intimidating. But I think for our type of profession, if you have patience and you have great relationship skills and you have and people in general matter to you and you want to be at work with people, I think your classes will work themselves out. And that college life piece, because I had that goal I didn't have a career goal. I had what I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference goal. And I think if you go into it like that, it's less intimidating, especially, like I said, those first generation college students, they have no base to think, if I get in trouble in my classes, my mom's been through this, she'll be able to help. It's, you have to have that main thing to start. And then everything else hopefully will fall into place for you. So.
Amazing. I hope people are hearing that advice. That's so valuable.
And second, just another note, the SLP I was talking about, I have told her the story of sitting on the bed. She's a local SLP that still works a little bit every once in a while. She seems to get on every time I see her. So
that's so incredible. Wow. What a career highlight for her, I'm sure.
Hope so.
I love it. And I also love, I didn't know that you were a fellow first gen. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I was actually going to ask a question about that. So I love that Elizabeth, we were on the same wavelength. It's like, it just happens so often, but anyway.
We're getting so good at this.
So I love that, just to know that like speech language pathology or maybe a career in communication sciences and disorders, like it's doable. And there's a great community of people who are willing to support you, whether you're first gen or not, or, maybe coming from a different cultural background or whatever. I really feel that we have a community that wants to support and uplift each other in the long run. So, okay.
I agree. I think just to speak to that, I had a high school cadet teacher. So she was a high school student interested in the profession. And so anybody that's listening that's a current SLP, take those high schoolers in, because she was not only a first generation college student, but she had immigrated here from a different country. And so her parents didn't speak a lot of English. And so she said, I don't think I could do this job. So she shadowed me for a semester, as part of a high school class. And every time I see her mom is actually a paraprofessional in one of her elementaries. She said, oh, she's doing so great. She's so happy. It's such a good career for her. And she just thanks me. And all I did was let her follow me around. I didn't, but being open to that exposure to our younger high school and then our younger college students, I think it's not extra work. In the long run, it's less work for us when we get more people excited.
What a perfect way to be story, way to be. And you could have chosen to say, no, I don't want to take it in, or, oh, that's extra work, or I'm going to have to talk more or whatever. But you did, and you chose to invest not just in future profession, but in her as a person. And she's going to no doubt impact lots of other lives too. That's the kind of stuff that makes
she's going to be a bilingual SLP. I don't know if there's anything we need more. She's going to be a bilingual SLP here in about a year. So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe to align with that, what are your top tips? Well, you mentioned about getting into the profession, so maybe I'll switch gears a little bit. Who do you feel like your mentors have been in the profession?
interestingly, they weren't SLPs. They were the occupational therapists and the developmental therapists and the physical therapists that I've worked with and the special education teachers that I have worked with throughout the years, because they have exposed me to the idea that I don't have to be protective of my skill set. It's that collaborative model that does best for kids. And so the ones that inspired me or my mentors were the ones that, like, I think of a preschool teacher who was always joyful. She was always present with the kids that were in front of her, and she was always learning. So those are the people that inspired me and mentored me throughout more than SLPs. I learned a lot from other SLPs, but once I got out of the college setting where they were the experts teaching me how to do my thing, to do my thing better after college, I was looking for the people that, like I said, that were always present with those kids and the ones that were able to stay joyful even in the stressful setting of a school, which can be stressful, especially in developmental preschool. This was a developmental preschool teacher who would just always find the joy in whatever might have happened that day. So those people that are present with the kids no matter what happens and find that joy are my mentors professionally. After I get out of, after the college, that I had lots of mentors in college, right? We have those that are assigned to us, and then our CFY, we have a mentor assigned to us who I'm very grateful to her for teaching me the ins and outs of the profession. But that mentor to do what we're doing in a school, I would always say, seek out the other people I just like to watch anybody do their job well. I don't care what they do, but I like to watch anybody take joy in their job, whatever it is they're doing, and to find those people.
I'd love to ask just a follow-up question. I love that you said, like to find the joy, to seek joy, because, I think it's really easy to see the problems, right? It's really easy to point out those problems and be like, nope, that didn't work. And that was terrible. And what was I thinking? Right. That's easy. But sometimes it's hard to be like, you know what, that went better than expected, or that was good. Right. So I'm curious if you might have maybe an example or two of maybe some situations where maybe things weren't going quite so well, but then you thought, oh, that's the nugget of joy that we're going to latch onto today.
Oh gosh, yes. It involves shaving cream in a general education classroom. I will tell you, I thought I had the best speech and language, co-teaching lesson plan where I took shaving cream and aluminum foil into the classroom, put it on every kid's desk, focusing on my students, right? That I put it on everybody's desk, and it was Dr. Seuss's birthday. And I thought, I'm just going to put shaving cream on your desks, and we're all going to draw a Seuss world, right, with our fingers. And then I'm going to come around, take a picture, and we'll make a book, and everybody tells me their story, right? So it was going to be a week-long type thing. And what ended up happening is that one kid came up and grabbed my back and got shaving cream all over my back. One of the kids was hitting their hands in the shaving cream as hard as they could to see how far it would go. The teacher was looking at me like, what on earth is happening? And I could have definitely just, it's seen, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I've ever done. What was I thinking? But then I looked over, and one of our students that comes in from our life skills room, our self-contained classroom with autism, was giggling with a peer and drawing on her desk together. And that moment of, this could have all been horrible. And it really was. But there was something to take out of that, as every time she came in, then she had that memory. She didn't realize how bad it was for me, but the student that was always nervous about integrating into this classroom, she didn't speak, but she was giggling with a peer kind of for the first time. The first time we actually saw true interaction. And that's what the teacher remembered. Like when I bring up that story, I'll say, wasn't that just the most messy? Why did you ever let me back? And the teacher said, yeah, but do you remember when so-and-so was giggling with so-and-so? And so that's the memory that she kept. And you're right. If you don't look for, especially in school settings, especially now as a special education provider or a related service provider, you don't look for it, you definitely will not find it. And if you don't look for the difficult stuff, it'll just comes at you all day. You don't have to look for that. So I totally agree. It's just the way you frame it. And even when it comes to advocating for things you do want to change, right? If you want to advocate, it doesn't have to come from that you don't have to be mad necessarily to advocate. You can do solution-based advocacy. Like, wouldn't it be great if we were able to fix this by doing this great thing, rather than this thing is awful and we need to fix it because we want to make it better. There's just a different mindset that comes with that. So solution-based advocacy is kind of where I'm wanting to lead, school-based SLPs from a joyful perspective versus it's just so awful, which in reality, it's pretty hard right now to be a school-based provider. But there are all of those little things that happen throughout our week that it's easy to forget. So.
That's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Could you talk more about all this advocacy that you're doing? And I know you're very active in ASHA and ASHA special interest groups. What are some of those, hey, wouldn't it be great if kind of things that you'd like to see happen for school-based SLPs?
I spent some time as on the ASHA School Issues Advisory Board for a while, and then I was the chair of that. And so our job then was to take all of the current trends and issues that are affecting school-based SLPs and kind of elevating that information. Really, it wasn't a product-based committee. It was just elevate that information to people that might be able to make a difference, the board or whatever. And when you start collecting all of that and you try to figure out, there's not a one catch-all solution to all things, right? And there's also other problems in school settings beyond just related service providers, right? There's a teacher shortage, there's money shortages. And so thinking about talking to administrators and just taking another problem, I really want to frame it around solution-based advocacy. Like if we try, for instance, I just got off of a webinar that I was leading for another state, right, just a little bit ago, about 3-to-1 model of service delivery, which is just one way to help alleviate some of the difficulties with workload. But if you go into your administrator and the solution to the workload or the high caseload is to maybe try a flexible service delivery model. And this is what it would look like. And this is someone that could consult with us to help us get it started. So that kind of thing, or addressing workload or addressing how to address not just pay, but maybe other things that would benefit SLPs in a school setting. Like we advocated to get our ASHA dues paid for. And that was just a wonderful little thing that kind of helped our morale. And then we advocated, we know we can't get too much of a pay raise, or we can't move off the contract this year, but could we please go to our state convention paid for by the school? And it wasn't the best, it wasn't the best compromise, but it was something. And it was a solution to feeling overwhelmed and having to pay for our PD and having to pay for our license. And it just helped keep us going with the conversation. So just those kind of things, going in with a solution, a possible solution to some of the things that we're advocating for is where I would like to have our mindset.
I love hearing about all of the advocacy work that you're doing. I think I love that you use the phrase, solution focused or solution, because I think it's one thing to come in and say, all these things are wrong. And it's another thing to come to the table saying, here are maybe some options for what we could do better, right? Like, I don't know that any of this is going to work, but maybe it might. And it's at least not the same direction we're headed in. So Is it worth the trial, right? Like, I think I love, again, having that growth mindset.
And speaking of that, like also the growth mindset to be willing to listen, like I'm on the 616 coordinating committee. There are like professional people that have advocated wonderful things in giant, state of California. And this is what they're so good at it. And I've learned so much just from listening to other people's ways of advocating and, just doing it on your own is so much harder. So joining any kind of, it doesn't have to be an ASHA committee. It can be your state. It could be your state association. It could be anything like that. But it makes you feel less overwhelmed when you hear, first of all, everybody else is having the same problems, but then you're not on your own trying to figure out the solutions, right? And so being on committees and being like with the 616 coordinating committee, there are many minds on there that have moved us toward this solution-based advocacy mindset. And so you're not alone, and you actually have a lot of great people coming up with those ideas.
So one thing that I'm hearing from you is if you're a school-based SLP and you want to see change, figure out who your allies are, whether that's in your district, your state organization, national level organizations. What other advice might you have for school-based SLPs? And it could be advocacy related, or it could just be the day-to-day how to design a shaving cream activity related. What do school-based SLPs, if someone's thinking, I think that's the direction I might take my SLP career, what advice would you have for them?
Actually, I really like that you said the word career, because I have a freshman, my own daughter's a freshman in college, and she's so focused on what she's going to major in, right? And what her career will be. And I think if there was anything that I would change when I was in school myself, I was so focused on the professional training I was receiving and not even thinking about the life training I was receiving as a professional. So if I were to, I think your question was, what advice would I give, or
Sure.
what did you? Okay, it would be to focus on, yes, take the classes, and I know SLP courses are very hard, and graduate classes are just so overwhelming, but make sure that we're not focused on the career outcome of it, because if you do that, then when you go out and take your professional development courses, they're always going to be focused on SLP, communication sciences. And if I had any piece of advice, is when you do professional development after college, do something other than communication disorders. Go to those OT, go to those courses on autism, go to those courses on behavior and trauma-informed care. And that's where I was able to decide I wanted to get my PhD in special education and not communication disorders, so that I could be a better SLP. So those things aren't, if you have that career focus, you're always going to go to the things that are focused on SLP audiences. But if you go to the other type of topics, you'll have so much more to like flavor your services up and, spice it up a little bit so that it's not, and you also don't become so protective of your skill set. When you see that there's so much overlap of what an occupational therapist and a speech therapist do, you'll be much more open to actually co-treating with them, because you realize that your protected skill set, they have a lot of the same skills, right? Or if you go to a training for people that work with developmental therapists who work with students with autism, you will learn so much about how to work with students that have autism while you're working on the skills you want to focus on. So I think that answers your question in terms of what advice, and would I give?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we asked you to speak about school-based issues because you're very much an expert there. But I think another theme that you've brought in is this interprofessional practice. Is so crucial in the schools, but in any setting. So see, right. we could have had you talk about two topics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up question, because I actually had a note from earlier when you mentioned it. Because I just feel like being a school-based SLP, you almost, we can't miss this opportunity to talk about what not only what interprofessional practice looks like in the school setting, but like, what would you recommend? Is like, because I'm sure you've probably seen, maybe even been a part of some teams that maybe have worked really well, and maybe some that maybe haven't worked so well. So what would your tips be for working well on interprofessional teams be? Or what might you recommend?
It's funny because my dissertation was kind of focused on one piece of the literature review was focused on interprofessional practices and how my research would support it. And I think it's my tip would be, if you're going to be working with 6 different professionals to support a student or a group of students, you need to have some kind of common thread, right? You need to have something that everybody knows that's going on, something that everybody has a plan of action, something, and it doesn't have to be their IEP. It doesn't have to be, everybody doesn't have to work on the same goal per se, but that common thread, if you work in a school, you're very lucky because it's already set for you, and it's the curriculum. It's the curriculum that is provided for each grade level, or, preschool has a curriculum, life skills, first grade. And if you use that common thread, and you put the time and energy as a related service provider, an SLP and OT, into learning what they're learning most of their day in the classroom, then that interprofessional practice piece will fall into place a little bit easier. First of all, the teacher knows that you're invested in what they're trying to teach, because that's why we're there, right? Their delay has a negative educational impact on their ability to access their education. And it's the teacher that's trying to provide that education. So they're depending on us to take away that barrier, that educational barrier, so they can continue to teach. If I don't know what they're teaching, then I can't remove that educational barrier. So my research focused on what materials related service providers should be using when they work in a school. And so I compared, commercially available speech therapy materials and a spelling list from a first grade classroom. And I did alternating treatment design, and I looked at when an SLP used those 2 different types of materials during speech therapy, did their spelling grade improve if they used the spelling list? And it did. And what was funny is, not only did their spelling, and this is where it speaks to the interprofessional practice, not only did their spelling grades improve the weeks that the SLP used the spelling list during therapy, their speech sound production improved. And I think it's because the teacher knew what words they could focus on because they knew the SLP had used that spelling list. So they were willing to work in the classroom too. So actually both pieces, the educational impact, the grade and spelling went up, as well as their speech sound production went up. And that speaks to that. It benefits the kid if we work together, basically, because and that common thread is the curriculum that is in front of them already. Also, speaking of workload of SLPs, it saves them tons of time. So some of that workload I'm speaking to some college students here in a couple of weeks, and the very first thing I'm going to say is stop making stuff. Stop spending all the time and money on laminating and Velcro and, downloading things and paying for things, because it's all right there and it's been paid for by your school. Your skill set is supposed to be able to adapt that and be able to use it in order to provide services. So it's also a benefit if young professionals learn early on that common thread is important for interprofessional practice, but also for their school life. Their workload will decrease if they are willing to use the curricular materials that are already there.
Such terrific advice for new professionals and some people who have been in the field a long time who are still spending a lot of time and money on things. I love how you said the school district already paid for it. It's all right there. That is another
and it's research-based advice. And it's research-based.
Right.
Sometimes people download some things and buy some things that we don't know where it came from, but we know a curriculum paid for by a district is definitely based in some type of research. And
seems to have positive effects not only on their educational access, but as your research showed, communication as well.
Right. And interprofessional relationships too. The teachers trusted the SLP more. And they let her, and here's another part. They didn't mind her pulling them out of class as much when they knew the same materials were going to be a focus of therapy. There wasn't instructional content to make up when they went back in. So it was just a really interesting things I didn't even think of came out of that research.
That is so powerful for school SLPs to hear and for teachers and to think about that professional relationships as a team. So thinking about that, and I wish that would be happening in every school, where do you see the field? And maybe the field is huge, but we could stick to school-based SLP issues. Where do you see that going in the next 10 years?
Well, my concern is that we will lose so right now it's already moving to this, that there's so many kids that have so many different medical diagnoses and so many different needs who all come to school, right? And there's the trauma that they might endure. Also, there's the socioeconomic difficulties and all of that but every single kid goes to school. So more and more and more and more, I feel like SLPs are feeling like they have to become the jack of all trades in every disability area. They need to be an expert in apraxia, and they need to be an expert with autism, and they need to be an expert in trauma-informed care, and all of these different things can be super overwhelming. And I think it's preventing us from being cheerleaders for our profession, the current people, and it's also preventing people from wanting to come. And so I think that my worry is that might get even more so, with COVID and the pandemic and the learning loss and all of that. But my goal is to combat that, where that jack of all trades is what's killing our workload. That jack of all trades mentality is what's killing our workload, because we were kind of trained clinically to have an expertise, right? This is an SLP that is an expert in autism, and this is an SLP. When you are an SLP working in a school, your expertise should be educational access and how you can ensure that no matter what deficits the kids have, that you are an expert in ensuring that they can access their education in spite of whatever disabilities they may be coming to school with. So educational access could be an SLP's expertise area. And so promoting that, like promoting, you don't have to know everything about everything. Swallowing is coming back in schools, right? Like all of that is coming at us, and I don't want that to be where it goes. I want it to be, yes, all of these things, but my job is to ensure that they can still access the educational content that their teacher is presenting, or I can accommodate them, or I can teach them a workaround or something so that they can still access that. So where I hope it goes is that we change our focus on being like a clinician that works in a school setting, like a clinically trained SLP who now works in a school, and being a school-based SLP who ensures educational access and educational impact of services. Because that's the reason they're eligible for them in the first place, right? Because they can't access it because of their communication delays. That's where I hope it goes. And that's where I see it going if we can get this idea going a little bit.
That is a powerful reframe. That the school-based SLP is the educational access specialist, because I think as someone who works with graduate students, one of the things that turns people off is that need to, well, I can't possibly be great at everything that's going to cross the door. And like you said, 99.99% of kids are going to go to school. And that is a really powerful reframe. And I think also speaks to the real specialized expertise that school-based SLPs have to have. This is not a lesser or easier route by any means. You really are an expert in the educational impact of feeding, swallowing, cognitive communication disorders and how to breach that barrier.
Right. Yes.
I love this discussion. I wanted to circle back just a moment because you mentioned a flexible service delivery model, and you've done some work in that area. And I'm guessing that maybe some of our audience, they may be less familiar with maybe what that is or what that might look like. So I guess I have a two-part question to just kind of circle back to. Number one, can you help us to define what is a flexible service delivery model, and then the second part is, if you know that's the direction you would like to head in with your school, how in the world do you get that started? What would you recommend?
Okay, and I'll answer the first part, and you might remind me of the second part.
Okay.
So the first part, a flexible service delivery model. So thinking about a clinically trained SLP and someone that works in a clinic, they see students maybe for 45 minutes to an hour back to back. For 6 hours a day, right? And then they have a lunch, and then one kid comes in and the next kid. So what happened is we tried to take that same model into the school setting, but we had to make the groups bigger and the time shorter. But what we were trying to do is fit this square peg into a round hole of, this is a school-based model of services, but we're still going to try to be a clinician and do it in a clinical way, which means back-to-back, direct, face-to-face services. And we even have this mindset that if we're not working directly face-to-face with a student in a school setting on their goals, then we are not actually working. So, if we're sitting and typing a very thoughtful report about an evaluation, we're actually not working. So we choose to do it after school, right? So the flexible service delivery model, one example of it is like the 3-to-1 model of service delivery, where you do 3 weeks of direct services for the most part without interruption, including doing some co-teaching, right? And the reason co-teaching fits so well into this is because when I tried to do co-teaching before a flexible service delivery model, I was continually canceling my co-teaching sessions to go do an IEP or to go run a case conference, right? Because I didn't have professionally scheduled time set aside to do everything that's part of my job description. And many people will be surprised to know that, I would say a good 40% of our job isn't about sitting face-to-face directly across the table with the student. A lot of that is doing the federally compliant duties of an evaluation and writing the IEPs and doing progress monitoring and writing the progress reports and billing Medicaid if your district requires that. So if we don't purposefully plan for that, what we're always going to be doing is canceling therapy to go do the things that we have to do anyway. So the 3-to-1 or the flexible service delivery model, however you want to frame it, is just purposely planning all duties of an SLP that works in a school and getting rid of the idea that if we're not working directly with a student face to face, that we can be working for a student without working with them, right? We can be working for them by programming an AAC device. We can be working for them by consulting with a teacher. We can be working for them by, creating materials that'll help them access their educational content for that day. That's included in a school-based SLP. I know in a clinical setting, really you bill for the times you're sitting face-to-face with a client. It's way different in a school, but we take that mentality in. So the flexible service delivery model kind of blows up that clinical mentality that we were trained in. And then we go in thinking, what's best for the kids, right? So the flexible service delivery model lets me go where they need me, when they need me in a school setting. So 2 times a week for 20 minutes in a group of 5 doesn't necessarily fit with where I think you asked me earlier, where speech and language pathology is going in the schools. I don't think that fits anymore, because that's back when kids were in the same classroom all day, and they didn't get pulled out for tier 2 groups. They didn't go to paraprofessionals for supplemental work. They sat with the same teacher all day, every day. And so now they're in and out of the classroom all the time. And and teachers want them in their room as much as possible, then you come to get them 2 times a week for 40 minutes, and they're missing even more instruction when they're pulled continually to meet with a counselor to get they get therapy at school now, which is great, but so it doesn't fit anymore. So we have to look at it with a more flexible mindset that maybe I'm in kindergarten for an hour Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but I don't know which kid I'm going to be working with, right? Because I'm going to be working with the student that's available or having the hardest time in that 20 minutes of that hour in kindergarten, rather than putting a name to a 15-minute time slot back to back to back. I'll be available and there and know who I want to see, but the order in which I see them kind of depends on the kid and who's not in the clinic and who's not in the bathroom. And, that's the flexible mindset. I go where they need me, when they need me, making sure I meet their minutes, obviously, that are in the IEP. So.
Awesome.
And the second part, I don't remember.
No, that's great. That's great. No, so the next part is if you're bought in and you're saying, okay, that sounds great. That's what I want to do. How do you get that started in your school district? What does that look like?
Well, and I actually just talked about this to another district. I think the main thing to do is make sure that you have your elevator speech ready. So when I was getting my when I was writing my dissertation and doing my research, one of my professors said, make sure you have your elevator speech ready, the 20 seconds that you're going to use to describe your research, right, to Joe Schmo off the street. So when you go in to talk to an administrator, you have about 20 seconds, right, before they need to move on. They're very busy. So to have the why, like the research behind it, which there's plenty, ASHA website, or you can look other places for articles. There's plenty of research that supports the flexible service delivery model, including 3-to-1, including that, and then including how it will best benefit students. So that solution-based advocacy goal of I always approach it for how it will improve a student's life versus mine, because that's why I'm here, right? I'm here for the students. So what can you do for me that will actually improve my students' school lives? And this is one of them. If my workload decreases, if I'm professionally planning and not canceling therapy to go do something I already have to do, having that elevator speech ready would be the first. I think researching, talking to someone that already uses it, getting someone to come in and do a training. But the number one thing I think you need is administrator support before you try to do something like that. And then how you will brand it, how you will present those ideas to parents, other people that you work with, other professionals that you work with, and especially the teachers, because it could be easily seen as a week off of providing services, right? The 3-to-1, you're working with kids 3 weeks, and then 1 week you're doing all of this paperwork. It could easily be seen, if it's not presented in the correct way, as a week off. And that's just it could be a whole mess. So.
I'm thinking of so many of my friends and colleagues who are school-based SLPs who I think are just going to love everything that you're saying. It's just fascinating. So before we go on to the rapid round, can you please tell us the kitchen table story?
I present on all different topics, right? I present on integrating services in the classrooms. I present on 3-to-1. I present on classroom integration, data collection, anything. But every time I wrap up, I like to use a video from a parent that I've created. It's like a montage of pictures that she sent me. I sent out an email to all of the parents I worked with to say, hey, what's working about 3-to-1? What do you enjoy about it? What do you think how's it benefiting your students from the parent's perspective, right? And so I got, from 74 emails, I think I got 2 responses. But the one response was an email from a parent that said, I didn't put much, I didn't think too much was going to come out of school-based speech therapy and school-based occupational therapy because it's free, right? And because I didn't think you had the same degree as a clinical SLP, I thought school and clinic was different. And so she went on and she was like, but listen, this has been my son said, I love you. And I credit the SLP with that. My son can write a note to his grandparents and I credit the OT. And she just went on and told these wonderful stories about his personality and his likes and his dislikes. And she said, I don't think I would ever know those without the school-based professionals that have worked with him. And I like to wrap up my sessions playing that video, obviously, to make sure that no matter, there's so much hard stuff right now for school-based, anybody that works in a school, but especially, school-based related service providers. And I like to end with that because I realized after I heard that there are parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles that talk about school-based providers at their kitchen table all the time, or in their living rooms or on car rides, they talk about how beneficial we've been to their kids. And we'll never know that, right? But we have to keep trying to remember that the reason we did it in the first place was to make that impact on our students. And so those kitchen table conversations, right? Those kitchen table conversations they have about us that we probably won't know about are the things that we need to keep in the back of our mind when on the hard days, right? On the things during the days that are a little harder. So
I love it. All right. So with that, I'm going to pull up our timer.
Oh gosh, this is the thing I'm most nervous about. Okay.
It's going to be great. You will be stellar. All right. So we've got 90 seconds on the clock. Rachel and I are going to go back and forth with some random rapid fire questions. Rachel, you get started. You can pass if you want to. On your mark, get set, go.
All right. Coffee, tea, or soda?
Coffee.
What is the weirdest food combination you enjoy?
I will put an egg on anything. An over easy egg on anything.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
What's your favorite color and why?
Yellow, just because it's a happy color.
Morning person or night owl?
Oh, morning. After 2:00, I'm done. You're lucky I'm still coherent right now.
What's your favorite vacation destination and why?
Probably a cabin in the mountains because I don't like sand. I would say most people would say beach, but I don't like sand.
Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix. I don't even understand how my daughters watch YouTube videos. They're only like a minute long.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, pass. I don't know.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, I have to pass because my husband's a social studies teacher and I don't want to pick the wrong one.
You'll get in trouble. Okay.
City life or country?
Country, unless I want to eat good food, and then city.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise. Again, morning person.
Instagram, Facebook, or X?
None. I'm bad at all of it.
What is your go-to snack?
Chocolate.
What a great note to end on.
Fabulous. See, it was great. It was great. Well, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today, Dr. Bradburn. We really appreciate it. And I think we touched on so many important things from, thinking about advocacy in the profession and, getting involved at maybe the state or national level, and then interprofessional practice and first gen and working.
Yeah, we did.
So many things. Yeah, it was great. So I guess there's really just one thing left to say, and that is way to be, Dr. Bradburn. And perhaps, just perhaps, maybe somebody in our audience or somebody that's listening today thinks that maybe this just might be a way to be for them too. That's what we're hoping for. So we're wishing you all the absolute best, and we're looking forward to future conversations. Thank you, Dr. Bradburn.
Thank you very much. This was great. I appreciate it.
All right, and we hope to see everyone else soon.